Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Depends on where you're joining us from. It's great to see you all today. Let's give another 30 seconds for participants to log in. While we wait for everyone to join in, would love to see where you are joining us from. Please type in your location in the comments. Okay, welcome everyone once again to today's LinkedIn live session on Gen AI. There's been a pretty of enthusiasm and a flurry of activity in 2023 on Gen AI, and a lot of second thoughts and recalibrations are also being thought through as companies realize that capturing Gen AI's enormous potential is harder than expected. We launched this series of conversations a few months back to bring on the ground perspectives from industry practitioners in a more informal and interactive format. We'll explore some of the key questions that are on the mind of enterprises as well as tech vendors and providers, especially around what is the current on the ground adoption for Gen AI, especially amongst enterprises. What are the various considerations you may need to think about on the technology front? What's going on with regulations? And other insights on how do you accelerate the deployment, build COEs, and so on and so forth. We would love to hear your comments and questions as we go along. So please type them in the comment section, and we will try to address them during the discussion or during the Q&A towards the end. As a quick introduction, I'm Ashish Sahadev, Vice President with Everest Group, and I lead our business in Asia Pacific region. I'm joined by my colleague Vishal Gupta, partner with the data and AI practice, who also brings in a wealth of experience in this area. And also, we are pleased to have Ketan Singh from Meta dialing in from Menlo Bay Area. I'll let Vishal and Ketan to briefly introduce themselves.
Thank you, Ashish, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vishal Gupta. I'm a partner with the firm Everest Group, and as Ashish said, I lead all our research and advisory in the broader data analytics and AI space. AI as a topic, or Gen AI as a topic, is very close to my heart, so I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm based out of our Gurgaon office in India, and looking forward to this conversation.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ketan, and I currently work at Meta. Most of my life, I've been close to technology, mostly around distributed systems and machine learning. And now, as we are moving or transitioning towards large language models, I'm working on serving these large models into production at scale of billions of QPS. So I'm happy to chat about some of the things that I've seen in my experience of so far, and happy to contribute in any way I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Vishal, and thanks, Ketan. So let's dive in. Vishal, let's talk about adoption trends. I think we've seen 2023 has been the year of lots of pilots, lots of experiments, lots of use cases have emerged. Some are now getting into production space as well. So talk to us about what are you seeing on the ground from an adoption standpoint.
Yeah, and I think this is a good kind of start to the conversation because a lot has been said and done about Gen AI, right? 2023, Gen AI was the biggest theme, and I still believe that going into 2024, we're already kind of 3 months in. It is still the biggest theme in the technology world. However, see, there are certain nuances that are emerging. While a lot of people are still gung ho about what Gen AI can potentially do, but the global macro environment, especially with some of the industries facing the heat from higher interest rates, curb in tech spending and other things, it's kind of forcing enterprises to think about where do they want to put the investments that they have in Gen AI, right? So while in 2023 there were a lot of experiments, pilots, POCs being done, what we're hearing is that look, while Gen AI is still a priority, there are already clearly earmarked budgets where enterprises would want to kind of spend on Gen AI. So the real question that is emerging is, hey, uh, tell us, or can we get to know where Gen AI is actually working rather than what Gen AI can potentially do, right? Because if you really think about all the conversations that happened in 2023, a lot was said around, hey, Gen AI can potentially solve for a lot of different things. But now the conversations are becoming more real, more practical, as to where it is working, and at least what we have seen, while Gen AI is being still deployed in a lot of different pockets and areas, there are three clear, if I would say this way, business functions that are emerging, where we see, clear adoption of Gen AI. So the number one is clearly customer operations, customer service. So think of, chatbots, right? That is one area where we have seen significant investment from a Gen AI standpoint. A lot of tools and applications being deployed, and to serve customers in a better fashion, to improve the experience, to the efficiency, and all those things. The second is IT, operations and IT, software development. I'm sure this is something that a lot of the tech world are very, very excited about. How Gen AI can aid software development in the entire SDLC lifecycle, from development, testing, and everything, right? And we've actually seen real progress in the last 6 to 9 months. There are specialized tools, that have emerged that have actually cut down the entire SDLC cycle, right, by a meaningful chunk. So this entire IT ops, SDLC is kind of second big area, and third is clearly marketing. Because if you really think about it, see, at least the technology where we are, and I still believe we are in the early stages of the Gen AI cycle, right? There's still a lot of ground to cover. If you really think about the technology today, a big part is around large language models and creating new content, new kind of based on the existing knowledge and text and everything. And that is where kind of marketing kind of becomes a natural synergy, because marketing has to create a lot of new memos, text, campaigns, and other things. So these are the top three areas where we are actually seeing, on the ground adoption. Of course, as I said, depending upon which industry you are in, there are also specific use cases where the needle has moved from a pilot to production standpoint. In fact, we have done a whole study. I will encourage our audience to visit our website. We have a dedicated page on generative AI. We looked at healthcare, banking, insurance, life sciences. We also looked at other horizontal areas, and we kind of showcased what are those use cases that are actually moving from pilot to production, which will give everyone a real feel of, look, going beyond the hype and going beyond saying that, look, Gen AI can do everything and anything. These are the areas or use cases where we're kind of actually seeing adoption. So that's kind of how I will put on the adoption standpoint.
Yeah. Ketan, what do you see? Anything to add on?
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with Vishal, like on in some of the areas, Gen AI can be very useful because some of these areas were kind of very non-critical to certain portions of the businesses. And Gen AI right now is at a stage where we can't afford like pure precision from it. So the areas that benefit directly from it are the areas where we can have some leeway. And content creation, like Vishal pointed out, like is one of those areas where people are seeing results in marketing, sales, and even basic content needs like website copy or reports. Second big area is like customer support and chatbots that we are seeing a rise in. So, for example, you can use Gen AI to write chatbots for your business that can understand user queries. So, natural language understanding is definitely one of the areas that is the basically big strong point for these large language models and Gen AI in general, which can help us put human out of the loop from the equation, and that can help us scale our businesses in a more profound way. The third thing I think I would say is the design aspect of it. So, like, remember, like 10 years back, we were like, if you were to prototype something, it would take quite a bit of time to get to a final or prototype ready stage. Gen AI based prototype design can now give us a head start in, let's say, 1 day or 2 days. You can get your website ready or your landing page ready If you want to generate a logo, you give it an idea or give it a prompt, it can generate something which can get you close to a final prototype. Of course, final polishing still requires human intervention, but you get an immediate head start with prototyping made easy by these Gen AI and Gen AI models or large language models enabled generation.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot more to see as a lot of experiments are going on. But I think looking from a technology perspective, I think that's where a lot of conversation is happening. Depending on what type of a business you are, and if I'm a business and I want to start a Gen AI program, there are a lot of considerations or parameters or choices that a company needs to make as they think through. So whether open source, proprietary, language models, and so on and so forth. So let's talk about some of these tech aspects, Ketan. What do you see are the considerations, and how does one think about whether to go open source versus proprietary?
Definitely, that's a very good point. Like it depends on the journey that you are in your business or your use case. So if you're a very large company, you can afford to probably train your large language model by yourself, fine tune it for your use case, and obviously refine it in terms of efficiency for training as well as inference. But if you're a business starting out on a niche use case, then I would suggest that going open source and then fine tuning a model would be the right start. And rather than going like all in with the proprietary infra, start with an existing model, and then that can help you get your foot in the door very early on, and would provide some direction in terms of like where you should invest next. So if you're a small or medium business, or if you are just starting out right now, I think it would be useful to look into the space, like what are the use cases that you have that can probably make use of the current Gen AI technology, rather than building your own stuff from scratch, which can have a lot of hidden cost. This cost may come from engineering resources, hardware resources, which mostly come in form of compute, and that compute can be your training compute or inference compute. And since large language models are notorious of like smaller or lower throughput, you would tend to pay higher costs if you were to go proprietary very early on and build your own model. So I would say in the initial stages, focus on existing models, fine tuning them, get an understanding of like how it fits your business needs. And then once you establish some baseline, then you can probably iterate on top of that, maybe invest more into the engineering side or onto the like how you are utilizing your compute. That can deliver you better ROI and probably reduce your cost for the longer term.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if I had
yeah, and
to
do we go
if
ahead,
I had to
Vishal?
add in to this, I think excellent points by Keith. And see, it's at the end of the day, it's kind of a comparison, right? One has to draw pros and cons of the two approaches, right? To be honest, and maybe Ketan, you can chime in here as well. See, as of now, um, a large part of the adoption we see is still with proprietary models, to be honest, right? Because they're kind of well trained. They're being now offered in a direct use case kind of a fashion, and there is also a fair bit of trust element of working with these models through their existing, enterprises existing tech stacks. That can be the cloud or the ERP or other things, right? However, at the end of the day, there has to be a kind of a deliberation. So, and those deliberation can be on, few different parameters. One is the cost part, which Ketan talked about, right? Proprietary models can cost more as opposed to, open source models because they are open source models, right? So comes cheap. But then there is the cost associated with training, getting the right data, and kind of tuning them to, your specific use case. But that kind of a cost is one element to think through. The second part to really think through is what kind of a differentiating moat you are trying to create within your organization. See, proprietary models are something which are kind of accessible to anyone and everyone in the market as long as you're willing to pay for it. But if using open source models, you can create private instances which are very specific to your business, trained on very curated, annotated data. You can create something very unique to your business, which can actually become a differentiating mode for you, right? And the third part is, the broader strategy for Gen AI, right? I mean, using proprietary models can also, in some situations, tie you to the specific vendors you are working with, but at the same time, they provide you, the benefits of, a ready talent pool and a finished product. On the other hand, open source models can give you the flexibility and the freedom the way you want to build some of the tech stack around Gen AI. But then again, you need to look at the whether you have the right talent skills to do that in house, whether you have the right kind of knowledge and data and other things, right? So these are some of the few aspects, I would suggest to kind of really think through, from an enterprise stakeholder standpoint, as you kind of start thinking about open source versus proprietary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how are we seeing the adoption of small language models versus large language models, right? I mean, large language models very expensive, need a lot of hardware. Again, coming to your point around cost, Vishal, and Ketan, what are we seeing? Is the viewpoint on small language models? Are we seeing a lot of organizations willing to focus on small language models right away and then go with large, or are you still seeing the enterprises wanting to go with the LLMs?
So large language models are very powerful models, and they're very good for broader tasks, but they're computationally intensive as well. Whereas smaller models are much more efficient and targeted. And I think they would be more ideal for a use case for like smaller, medium businesses. And I think they would be the ideal fit for a company that wants to serve their customers on a specific use case. But the problem there is that training a smaller model and getting it right requires a lot of expertise in how you handle your language models or Gen AI models in general. Uh, Larger companies tend to have that expertise or accessibility to that technical talent that enables them to work on these larger language models and deploy them in production, whereas that expertise is not as broadly available for like smaller businesses. So what ends up happening is that the smaller businesses tend to use larger language models and then try to fine tune it for their use case. And as I said earlier, it works well for the short term, but then your computational cost is going to go way up and you may not be able to afford that, depending on how many queries or how many users you have or how much traffic you're sending to that model. It may not be sustainable in the long term. So then it begets the question, like, when should you start investing in the smaller models? So we already know like smaller models might be more efficient and maybe more targeted towards your use case, so they might outperform larger language models in the long run, once you have fine-tuned it to perfection, if there is anything like that. But that requires a lot of expertise. So I think it is very subjective, and it depends on company to company. So if you think that you are getting better ROI or better returns on your investment in your initial LLM fine tuning based use case, then you should definitely invest in small models, hire talent, and then train them, ask them to be very upfront about the technologies they want to use, as well as make strategic investments in developing these smaller models which are targeted for the which are targeted to your business. Another problem with training small models versus large language models is that the reason smaller models perform better is because they have access to the proprietary data of your business. The LLMs that larger companies train, which are available generally in open source community, they may not have seen your data if your business is in a very uh, niche domain. So, I mean, even if it's like healthcare, let's say, even if somebody trained a large language model in healthcare data, it may not work out well for your use case because healthcare data is generally very domain specific as well. So it may not translate from one company to another. So that's why the development on smaller models is slower compared to LLMs. And that's why it makes sense to initially start on with LLMs and then later on make investment in smaller models.
Yeah, makes
Dave,
sense.
Yeah, see, if I have to add, and again, see, there are two aspects, right? One is the cost part, right, which kind of naturally, is kind of bringing the small language model because there is a lot of interest and conversation on small language model. The second is the quality. By quality, I mean the quality of the output from small language models. See, for the first part, cost, as Ketan said, the cost is kind of, somewhat clearer in the market that look, small language models by intuition, by just by the nature of how they are built, lesser parameters and all that, they are going to cost less as compared to larger language models. Of course, there's the training cost and other things, but in general, the cost will be lesser with the small language models. The quality aspect is debatable right now in the industry in some situations, and this is where Ketan can also kind of provide us some examples if there are around smaller language models doing better than larger language models because they are attuned to very specific use cases trained on that very curated data for that particular use case. So they might be able to produce better outputs, but in a broader scenario, LLMs are likely to outperform small language models if it's kind of more of a broad based use case, right? So these are the two considerations. But that said, there's a lot of interest around small language models in the market right now, right? Because one, the cost part is kind of becoming very, very important as enterprises are practically starting to implement and scale AI across their organization. Of course, cost is going to become a very, very important aspect, and the whole conversation around ROI is going to become important. And that is where the small language models are kind of coming into the conversation more and more often. However, as of now, again, the reality on the ground, the practical situation on the ground is that while there is a lot of activity happening on the small language model, there are many small language models that have emerged in the last 6 months itself, a lot of investments. The action, a large part of the action is still with the large language models. It's because of how they are set up, it's because of the output they are providing. We believe, at least in the long run, as some of these small language models become more prominent, as enterprises gain expertise and get the right skills to work with these smaller language models, they might eventually trump large language models in the long run. But in the short term, and if you see the situation right now, we still see the LLMs kind of being adopted more purely because these are early stages of the Gen AI technology cycle, and people are still kind of a little wary of working with something which they don't fully understand or don't fully trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Vishal. Another aspect of the foundational models is this choice between multimodal models versus the single modal, and of course now we see a lot of multimodal platforms for the enterprise kind of getting out, and it seems like that's another choice that the tech companies as well as the enterprises need to make. Ketan, what are your thoughts about that? What use cases? Where does one apply more? How should one think about this?
Yeah, definitely. Multimodal in general gets better context from the data. So, as the name suggests, like with multimodal training, you generally get image data along with the text data, along with some like codified vocabulary that is passed into the passed as an input to the model for training, and then the model is able to infer like which pieces of data are connected to each other. So it's kind of like the same attention mechanism that we generally use in transformers, but now it is across different modes of data. So it could be images, videos, text, other vocabulary that people can put in a custom way. um, the reason it delivers richer experiences is because you generally our world is not just text, our world is not just images or videos. It's a combination of everything. So in order to have these models understand our world as we perceive as humans, it needs to understand all different dimensions of our experiences, and that's the only way it can provide more richer results. So one of the interesting use cases that you can have is like in content creation is image editing. So for example, you have a source image, and if you want to edit some part of that image, you can provide a text prompt to do that. And I'm sure you must have seen so many demos of this on various social media platforms, that you can erase or change the color of the sky, or you can remove a lake, add a lake. So that has only been possible because of these multimodal trainings. So you co-train image and text data and pass it through the large language models, and they're able to infer the relations and entities that are in the image, and they are able to then make sense of the ontology that we have for the world in terms of the vocabulary that the model already understands.
Yeah, yeah. And as you are thinking about, again, adopting this, you want to think about when is the right time to go deeper into the LLM stack. I know, Ketan, you talked about a bit of resources, as well as talent, capabilities, a lot of things that go into the investments. So as you start with the even with the small language models, right, or even with the LLMs, when do you how do you think about going deeper into the tech stack, making those huge investments?
Yes. So it's very subjective. So I want to basically start from a large language model. So let's say we start with a large language model, and the reason most of the people do start with a large language model, which is open source, is because it's easier to get to a baseline first. So if you were to fine tune a large language model for us, for our use case, let's say we are a business that wants to predict like the amount of conversion that can happen for a particular product. So for that particular use case, we will use a large language model provided with text features, and then the output would be something like, okay, this particular product would have larger conversion if you were to place it on position 0 instead of position 1 or something like that. So once we fine tune it with our conversion data, it can deliver some results, but it would be computationally very expensive. And then there are very easy levers to pull with large language models that people generally use. Some of these are like a quantization, pruning, or like there's a channeling that you can do within the large language model, which is basically like you can turn off certain parts or certain pieces of these larger models that are not at all useful for your use case. So you with quantization, you can reduce the precision of the model. So these are the levers that people generally use to reduce the computational cost and still get some gain out of it. The reason you should invest in smaller models is because once you reach a plateau of these gains, you need to think about, okay, how do we go further from here? If you think that for your business, LLMs or this technology is providing a larger amount of gain, then you should definitely invest in smaller models, which are much more fine tuned towards your use case. So, what you have been doing so far is taking a very large model, which was probably trained on a broad set of tasks, and then trying to ask it, okay, let's perform inference on these smaller subset of tasks. So, first of all, the model may not be tailored specifically to your use case. It still has some remnants from its initial training on broad tasks, even after fine tuning. So that is problem number one. Problem number two is that it is still computationally expensive, even though you employed all those batching, quantization, pruning techniques to this particular model. You still are paying a lot more amount in compute than it is necessary for inference. And fine tuning this model is much more costlier. So if you were to invest in smaller models, uh, since it's providing more value to your business, you would be reducing the computational cost, both for training and inference, especially for training, because training a large language model or even fine tuning is very expensive. But if you were to go ahead with a smaller model, you would reduce this cost dramatically, and it would deliver better gains in terms of performance to your business, because now you are letting a smaller model cram up all the data that you have for your business, which is proprietary in any way, and basically deliver performance out of that data. I want to warn against using bad quality data, because the model is going to learn whatever you feed it. So if you have poorly crafted data for your small model, then it's not going to generalize well. The LLMs protect you against that. So LLMs have been trained on a large variety of data, so it's difficult to move the needle on it. It is you can fine tune it, but then you won't be able to put it into a state that is very bad for your business. With smaller models, it is easier to put your model in a bad state. And that's where the investment in engineering comes in. That's where you should definitely invest in a top class engineering and work and build your team so that they can work on these models, make them more efficient, make them more precise, and that can suit to your business needs.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
want to double
yeah,
down on that point. I think I completely agree with what Ketan said. And this is something that I've been hearing as well. See, on the small language model part, as I said, there's a lot of interest, but this data part, because at the end of the day, the output from the small language model, it would trump the other models or the larger language models, or it will have a better quality only if, it is being trained on the right data. And when I say right data, it means you have the data which is relevant to the specific use case you're trying to solve from through the large small language model, and at the same time you're annotating and labeling that data properly. In some situations, see, it's kind of what I've even heard is that the domain experts. So let's say in the healthcare industry, the people who work in the healthcare industry, the physicians, the nurses, and other, even their help is sought to label and annotate the data. So think of MRI scans or CT scans, right? A physician or a doctor doing it versus let's say a technical person doing it. There's going to be a world of difference in how the data is being labeled and annotated. So getting the right data and annotating and labeling that data properly will decide in a lot of ways how the small language model works. Because as Ketan said, the large language models protect you from this because they are being trained on a wide variety of data, right? So their outputs in that sense will protect you if even if you don't have like a highly curated annotated data. But on the other hand, small language models, if you don't have that data, if you don't have the right annotation and labeling, it can actually be, it may actually work against, you rather than kind of working in your favor.
yeah, yeah. No, see, seems like all these are very, very valid, considerations as a company thinks about their choice of technology and investments. So, if you're a smaller company, you may have to think it differently. If your business model is hinged on some of these new technologies, then you may want to think differently, and so forth. So, I think absolutely relevant. Before I jump to the next conversation topic, but I just want to share with our participants who are logged in. Everest Group did a research on AI vendors, and this was a report that we created a few months back on AI top 20, top 50. So that report is something that we thought it would be interesting to share with the participants. You would see the report link on the comments window right under the LinkedIn chat. So feel free to download, and if you have any questions on that later, feel free to connect with us. Just what I'll announce that right away. Vishal, let's talk about regulations, and we know that this whole space is still emerging, and a lot of regulations are coming up. For example, the recent regulations in the EU, the EU AI Act, right? So, what are your thoughts on these developments which are governing the use and development of AI?
See, this is a very interesting topic, and Europe, as usual, is kind of leading the charge here with the EU AI Act, right? And the chatter about regulations has been on since the whole Gen AI has made waves, right? Because it's very, very important to regulate the development and deployment of AI. We all know what it can do, the harmful effects and the detrimental impact on the society at large, right? I do believe that the EU AI Act is a significant milestone in the AI area on multiple dimensions. First, I think it's a very comprehensive legal framework for AI regulation globally. And secondly, I think it is also going to set a precedent for how other regions, governments might approach AI in the future. See, at the heart of this act, the aim is to protect citizens' rights and freedoms while also fostering innovation and entrepreneurship, right? The actual act, just to give 2-minute quick background on the act, the actual act might take up to 24 months to be fully enforced, but the enforcement on certain aspects, such as the high risk applications or the newly banned practices, it could start to happen as little as in 6 months. And the penalties are pretty steep. For the top end, for the high risk kind of applications, the fines can go up to 30 million euros or 6% of the company's global turnover. It's pretty steep, which means the government is saying, we mean business. It's not just for the sake of creating a regulation, we are creating it, right? And the quick summary is the act states that AI should be a human-centric technology. It should serve as a tool for people with the ultimate aim of increasing human well-being. And there are two key takeaways. While there's a lot of things, and one can read through the entire EU AI Act. In fact, we're also my colleagues are doing a webinar on 18th April. So if someone is interested in kind of understanding, going deeper into the EU AI Act, we're doing a webinar on 18th April. Nitish, Mittal, and Anil, partners with a firm based in London. They'll be doing that webinar on 18th April. But from this current, session standpoint, the if I have to give you a quick summary, so there are two key takeaways from the EU AI Act that every organization needs to understand. The first one is the act breaks down, all the AI tools and applications that an enterprise is deploying into, 4 categories. One is prohibited, second is high risk, third limited, and fourth is minimal risk. Which means, and as an organization, as an enterprise, you need to understand where your own tools and applications sit on the risk scale, because the penalties, the after effects of not kind of properly adhering to the regulations will become cheaper as you get into the high risk category. So think of high risk categories as AI applications being deployed for, let's say, driverless cars or in healthcare, as opposed to limited and minimal risk categories are AI being used for entertainment, like video games or something like that, right? So there are different set of applications where AI will be deployed, and they need to be classified according to their risk level, and the penalties are, accordingly decided by the government. The second big key takeaway, from the EU AI Act is there's a lot of emphasis on making AI transparent. So the way AI is kind of giving outputs, the whole ethicality, bias, everything. So creating transparency, which means an organization should be able to explain how the AI systems are coming to a specific output or an outcome, right? So the transparency part is the second thing which the act is focusing on. So these are the two big key takeaways. The risk scale for all the AI applications and systems and tools, and second is the transparency part. Of course, there are other things in the act, but I'm just kind of summarizing and providing the thought in a quick way. At the end of it, see, I think at the end of it, I think just to summarize, I think I do see it as a good development, and as I said, it's going to set a precedent for the broader industry. And I believe that the politicians and the people in the government, they are kind of making it very clear that this is something which is a priority to them, and they will make it. They'll do everything possible to tackle the huge regulatory challenges being thrown up by AI. And but there are two things. Again, just to kind of wrap up the conversation. One, writing and creating laws and act, in my opinion, is a very easy part. Although it took a lot of time for the government to create it, but it's relatively the easy part. The difficult part would be enforcing the law. There is still some bit of ambiguity and openness in the way some of the wording is being created in the act, right? On one hand, there's a lot of focus on transparency and making AI transparent, but at the same time, it is being written that if it is being used for certain situations where it's a trade secret or something very proprietary to the organization, then they can basically not tell what they are doing with it. So there is some bit of ambiguity. So the enforcement of the law will become very, very critical. And the second part is, it is at the end of the day, it is still essential for business leaders, to understand that, look, while the law is still catching up, and EU is the first one, the other countries will follow, and there might be some ambiguity. But I think the messaging being given by the governments across the world is, they will not, or they will put the foot on the accelerator when it comes to regulating AI, which means if you are kind of thinking on going big on AI or Gen AI, it might be worth your time and money to keep this at an equal priority rather than just thinking about what use cases, what costs, and what ROI I'm getting from AI, right? Thinking about responsible use of AI and thinking about how do I kind of start creating my AI ecosystem within my organization that will ultimately adhere to the regulatory framework and guidelines. I believe can save you a lot of penalty, cost, and trust as well. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the money you are going to pay up, it's huge, but it's also going to have a very, very negative impact on your brand because AI is a trust-based business, to be honest, right? If the consumers start distrusting you and start kind of pointing you out for the malpractices that you might be doing with AI, that can quickly lead to a big downturn or a big fall in your business.
Yeah, and we're already hearing whispers around this AI winter. There is a section with all the frantic investments that have happened in the last year. There is a set of people who are thinking that probably this will slow down, and it's not really a hype, but again, it will go through its hype cycle, right? So there is that commentary around an AI winter. What do you think about it, Vishal? Do you see that real,
Yeah,
or is it again?
it's a it's a very very interesting conversation, and for our audience, AI winter essentially what people are saying is there's going to be a gradual slowdown or decline in the interest and investments in AI that we are seeing in the market, right? See, I believe there are while okay, so I'll put it this way: is the hype turning into reality and practicality? Absolutely yes. After the Chat GPT launch in November December 2022, last year was a lot of excitement, hype, froth in the market. To be honest, I think after all of that, enterprises are getting into that reality check. That look, it's still a priority for us. It's still important for us, but we want to be practical as to where we deploy it. Because as I said, see, there is this whole macro environment which is also kind of creating um, a dent in a way where and how enterprises invest. The interest rates are still high, the inflation and everything is forcing enterprises to be cautious in their investments on tech, and that is where the while there is a pressure from top down on investments in Gen AI, because enterprises feel if they are not investing in Gen AI they might lag their competition. So they're going to invest in Gen AI, but they're going to invest carefully. They're not going to go splash money on each and everything. They're going to look at practicality, which is what are those areas where Gen AI is actually working rather than where it can work, right? So that will kind of kickstart a reality, a practicality phase where the investments will flow, but in a very cautiously optimistic fashion.
Yeah,
But
and,
that
and and there
said,
may also be a
yeah,
challenge, Vishal, on the compute power, right? And also the availability of chips. We're seeing that as probably a bummer, which is pulling back some of those immediate investments.
yeah, I agree, and I think Ketan can kind of I think he works very closely with some of this, but the hardware part is real. The challenges with the hardware part is real. There's not enough to go by, so that's kind of going to force again prioritization of investments. But I'll let Ketan share his thoughts on this part.
Yeah, definitely. There is definitely some hype around Gen AI. There are exaggerated short-term expectations from this technology, but we shouldn't forget about like genuine long-term transformative potential that this has. And of course, that being said, do I can say for sure that we are experiencing hardware winter for sure, and I think it will continue on as the availability of chips is limited. So that basically leaves very limited exploration opportunities for the people who actually want to develop new applications. It might be okay for larger companies that they will get a continuous supply of hardware, but it might be harder for smaller and medium businesses to get their hands on actual hardware. They might still be able to use cloud compute, but that generally comes at a higher cost over higher amortized cost over 8 years or 10 years of owning that hardware. So definitely there is AI winter for hardware, but I wouldn't call it AI winter for AI or Gen AI in general. I'm sure there are a lot many applications that will come, and that will produce some genuine use cases from this after the initial short-term expectations die down a bit.
And I'll add to
Yeah.
this, and I'll add to this. See, just to complete my thought as well. See, I think I agree with Ketan. I do believe that, I don't think, it's unlikely that we are entering a AI winter. There are two key reasons or two key hypotheses why I believe so. So the first one is, if you really think at the current adoption and scenario of AI, see, most enterprises are still in a very, very early stage of AI Gen AI adoption. So it's not the case that a lot of enterprises have adopted it and they failed, which means the technology didn't deliver on the promised outcome. So which means it's still kind of unexplored in a way as to the real potential or the output or the impact that AI can create. It's still kind of a lot of it is in kind of conversations, but the ultimate on the ground action is yet to be seen because enterprises are in still a very early stage, which means to write down the technology and say here it can't create an impact, it's kind of very early to say because there is very little adoption on the ground. Very few, I would say, less than 5% of the enterprises or even lower number have truly scaled AI across the organization. Most are still kind of in experimentation, still trying to use pilots and in pockets and POCs, right? Which means we are yet to see that real adoption. And once that comes, then it will become clearer and clearer what is the kind of impact that AI is creating. The second key reason why I think we might not enter AI winter is, see, there is also this notion around the arms race for AI, right? Think about this in the 1950s and 60s, when there was a space race between the US and the Soviet Union, right? The human or the mankind would have landed on moon much later had there been no space race. The same with AI, right? There is a arms race which is forcing a lot of enterprises, especially the big techs and other tech companies and the investors, to invest in AI to gain supremacy. So despite the or irrespective of how fast or slow the adoption moves, given that AI is the new kind of weapon or new battleground, we will continue to see, at least in the short term, huge investments from different countries and geographies and companies to gain an upper hand in this new AI race. So these two reasons make me believe that it's kind of an unlikely scenario that we may enter a AI winter soon. But at the same time, I think the point around being practical and doing a reality check, I do agree with that. The hype and the froth that was created in 2023, we are well past, or we are kind of gradually moving past that stage where it's kind of a more practical, real conversation around where to adopt Gen AI, what it will cost, which technology, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think with the pragmatism now and with all the learnings from the last year, I think definitely the efforts will be more targeted. And I think a lot of pilots that were in the experiment mode are now trying to move into production. There are still a lot of challenges, but some of them will make into production, and we are seeing more and more pilots. So this is still early times, and a lot more I think we'll see in this year. We're almost on top of the hour, but would love to wrap up with some parting comments. Ketan, what do you see? Any additional learnings, insights that probably we may not have covered that you may want to share with our audience, especially around adoption, choice of technology, and so on and so forth?
I would like to summarize my mental model a bit on how to proceed from here. Basically, I would suggest if somebody's starting out, start small and iterate on top of it. Basically, focus on high value that any way you can get, like whether it's with just using LLM directly or Gen AI model, open source Gen AI model directly and building value for your business, or maybe fine tuning it a bit and then using it for use case, and then iterate on top of it. As you move along in that direction, you will understand which direction is more suitable for your use case. And the second thing is data. So LLMs generally have a large corpus that they have trained upon. It may not be necessary for your use case, definitely. So what you want to do is you want to curate your data set according to your use case and build robust data governance and quality around it. And that kind of falls into the best practices that we can do in the light of so many acts that are being proposed or have been passed all over the world. So we need to be good at data governance, as well as we need to be able to transparently justify the predictions that the model is taking. So with technology we can build explainability as well as transparency as first class citizens in our models, and that will help us a bit more upfront, a bit more clear, and will protect our business in the long run.
Vishal, how about you?
See, I think I'll say three things. One, be bold, take risks. This is a technology that can fundamentally change the game in your business. So just sitting on the fences, thinking about, hey, I'll let it mature and kind of become more, widespread. Only then I will invest. I think can be detrimental to your business. You can lose out to your competition. So be bold, take a risk. I understand one needs to be practical. So see where are those use cases where Gen AI is actually started to make impact, moving from pilot to production. That's number one, absolutely do it. Number two, talk about or learn and have a clear understanding of the responsible AI framework from the get-go. Don't think that, once we'll kind of scale and we're going to implement AI, Gen AI across different parts of the business is when we'll kind of start talking about the security, the explainability, the ethicality aspects of AI. I think this is a conversation which needs to happen from the get-go as you start building your strategy for AI, Gen AI, because it can have real implications, and more importantly, the regulations are now catching up. With the innovation, which means it can also mean severe penalties and detrimental to your brand if the development or the deployment doesn't happen in the right fashion. And I think the third part is this is where you need to think through build versus buy. uh, Clearly, if there is a dearth of talent in the market who understands, AI, Gen AI, right? Which means, and the reason I'm talking about it is there are a lot of, conversations that I had with enterprise stakeholders and others who said, look, we want to do a lot of stuff in-house and all that stuff. I would encourage, the stakeholders to take external help. This isn't something where there's precedence. This isn't something where there's a lot of existing stuff that you can leverage, right? So take external help, take along your partners, work with them, and devise a strategy where you can have some internal, you can parallelly build internal capabilities, but you utilize external help, your strategic partners, to move along and progress on your AI Gen AI agenda. So these are the three things I will say with the overall message: be bold, take risks, invest, because this is something that can change, a lot of things, or fundamentally disrupt your business.
Great. Great conversation, Vishal, Ketan. I hope our audience found it useful. Thanks once again, Ketan, for joining us in late evenings of your time from Bay Area. And thanks, Vishal, for joining us. We do plan to come back with more such conversations where we will invite industry practitioners to share more on the ground insights around Gen AI and its adoption. So watch out for more such sessions. We do have a ton of our research available on the Everest Group website, so feel free to have a look and download what's available. We have the link posted in the comment section around our report, the Everest Group AI Top 50. Feel free to have a look at that and do share us your comments. Look forward to more such sessions. But thanks again, Ketan, Vishal, and thanks to all the audience for listening in to us. Thanks once again, and have a great day.
Thank you,
Everyone,
Vishal.
have a great day. Thanks, Ketan. Bye bye.
Thank you.